Throughout history, Caucasians have demonstrated an entrenched predisposition for brutal racism that is matched only by their proclivity for deceit, greed, and hunger for power. They alone are the most arrogant and the race most predisposed to racism. All other races have been their enemies or their victims. The Caucasians have also demonstrated an almost total disregard for the human lives of non-whites throughout history. Their subjugation, murder, and exploitation of all other races are unparalleled. While labeling all other races as being savages, Caucasians have in fact been the most brutally savage throughout history. Yet, in spite of these noted facts, Caucasians are most often now perceived as being the racial group possessing the highest ethics and moral standing. And we, Africans, their greatest victims, are more often perceived as being the racial group possessing the lowest ethics and the least moral standings, in spite of a brutally horrific history to the contrary. These profound contradictions from reality exist because public perception is not shaped based upon facts nor reality. It's actually shaped by the narratives that are repetitively fed into a society. The public functions based upon those narratives that are constantly fed into our society rather than reality. Because Caucasians control the narrative, they therefore own the perception of reality. The basic tool required for distorting reality is to merely feed distorted narrative into society. The public at large will then function based upon those narratives rather than the true reality. This is precisely what white social scientists and white propagandists have done. Because they control the narrative, they systematically feed white exalting narratives into our society. And in doing so, they've literally given their racial group an image makeover. Okay, and the public functions based upon the narratives created and the image makeover they've given themselves, rather than the true reality. This is why they're often favorably perceived now. The reason why Black people are negatively perceived is also because Caucasians are controlling our narratives, and they constantly feed negative narrative into society about Black people, narrative that serves their hidden agendas, racist agendas against Black people. They vilify us to falsely validate their mistreatment of us. They dehumanize us to make others insensitive to our plight. And they keep us believing the fraudulent, worse narratives about ourselves, because when the oppressed are demoralized and made self-loathing, they're much more easier to control. It also creates self-hatred and disunity, which attacks the core foundation of what bonds us as a people, and they can then rule over us forever. The public at large are functioning based upon those narratives rather than the true reality. The narrative that exalts whites and marginalizes Black people. We function based upon those narratives rather than what is actually true. These false narratives are so deeply embedded into our society that we even hear them being expressed within jokes told by many Black comedians. The jokes often contain humorous commentary about trusting their white friends more than they do their Black friends. They're not functioning based upon reality. They're functioning based upon their narratives that are fed into our society. Most people are totally unaware of how easy it actually is to manipulate the collective minds of the masses. It's a true social science. The white society's core power is that they write all the narratives that the masses blindly accepts as being facts. By systematically feeding false white exalting narratives into society, they've literally whitewashed the perception of reality, thus creating an elaborate illusionary truth effect. An illusionary truth effect is when people are made to believe that false information is true by repeated exposure to the false information, and then begins functioning based upon the false information rather than the true reality. Keep repeating lies through media ads, falsely scripted movies, and miseducation, and before long, everyone will accept the false narrative. Repetition makes the disclosure appear more truthful. It's a true social science. Case, point, and proof. Through falsely scripted movies and whitewashed history books, Millions have been made to believe that Thomas Edison is responsible for lighting up the entire world. The hidden reality is that after Edison patented his light bulbs, no companies purchased it nor mass produced it. This is because it was deemed not efficient enough. It lit very dimly and it only lasts a few minutes. The inventor whose light bulb was purchased, mass produced, and it was spread around the world, and who was dispatched around the world to oversee his installation was actually an African American named Lewis Latimer. He sold a patent to the U.S. Electric Company in 1881, and they dispatched him around the world to oversee his installation. Therefore, the true narrative is that it was a black man that lit up the entire world. But the white society would not allow black people to have that narrative, so they stole it from us. White historians have also miseducated millions to believe that Henry Ford invented the first automobile. It was actually an African-American inventor and carriage company entrepreneur named Charles Richard Patterson that built the first automobile. The C.R. Patterson and his Son Company started out as a carriage building firm in 1873. In the early 1900s, Patterson and his sons converted the company from a carriage business into an automobile manufacturer. It was released in 1905, and it sold for $850. It had a 4-cylinder Continental engine. C.R. Patterson began making automobiles before Henry Ford, and his automobile was considered even more sophisticated. C.R. Patterson and Sons were forced out of business by Henry Ford in 1939. But our whitewashed history books tells us the lie that Henry Ford invented the first automobile. Through this nefarious whitewashing practice, white propagandists have manipulated the world to believe that Caucasians are responsible for most inventions that have revolutionized the world, and to perceive that black people as being the leeches of society that haven't invented much throughout history. This creates false assumptions that aids in maintaining white social dominance over black people. But it's totally untrue. The hidden reality is that in spite of cultural traumas wrought by the injustices of white racism and slavery, most inventions that revolutionized the world were in fact either invented by black people or were inspired by early inventions by black people. Black people have in fact enriched nearly every aspect of the white society through our many inventions. Without black people, there would exist no internet, no cell phones, no emails, no GPS, no hearing aids, no touch-tone phones, no caller ID, no home security surveillance system, no home game cartridges, no motorized vehicles, no steam engines, no traffic lights, no working light bulbs, no elevators, no skyscrapers, no air conditions, no modern PC, no 3D movies, no central heating, no refrigerators, no helicopters, no washing machine, no dryers, no refrigerated trucks, no blood banks, no fiber optics, no nanotechnology. There would be no accurate weather forecasting system. There would be no film sanitary pads, no lawnmowers, no pencil sharpener. No, I already said that we would not have cell phones without black people because the gamma electric cell phone was invented by Henry T. Sampson. But there's more. Most of our cell phones would not have microphones in them if it wasn't for a black inventor named James Edward West. And a black electrical Jesse Russell created the digital 2G network that predates the 5G. Your entire perception of reality is an elaborate white deception created by feeding false narrative into our society that exalts whites and marginalizes black people as a means of maintaining white social dominance over black people. Your entire perception is an elaborate white deception. It's a social science that's being used for maintaining white dominance over black people. It's time for us to wake up to the social science. It's the result of a perception management system. Perception management is a propaganda technique that involves altering public perceptions of reality to suit the objective of the ruling class. It is an essential part of modern information warfare. Here's the reason why this perception management system was developed, okay? After slavery was abolished in the U.S. in 1865, beginning between 1870 through 1940, African Americans submitted 726 invention patent applications to the U.S. Patent Office. Not only is this extraordinary within such a short span following slavery, where we were denied education and in spite of receiving no reparation, it also more than doubled the number of patents submitted by the white society during the same time period. White social scientists determined that if this fact became commonly known, it would erode the white society's empowering perception of white racial superiority over black people, which is necessary for maintaining white social dominance over black people. This created a unique dilemma. The white society wanted to continue its societal gains made by the great minds of black people, but they didn't want to lose their social dominance over black people in the process. They therefore decided that they could continue exploiting the genius minds of black people and yet maintain their social dominance by deploying a perception management system that conceals the fact that most revolutionizing inventions are coming from the minds of black people. This disclosed perception management system meets that objective by giving credit to the falsely giving the white society credit for black inventions, thus maintaining their position of social dominance over black people. This is why most people are clueless of the fact that most revolutionizing inventions are actually coming from the minds of black people. Through this nefarious practice, the collective self-esteem of the white masses has been falsely bolstered at the expense of the collective self-esteem of the black masses. If you want to truly liberate yourself, you have to put down your fictional Bibles and the fictional William story and start learning social science. You have to learn social science to understand the social science tactics that the white society deploys to maintaining their social dominance. We must learn those tactics and then develop counter strategies to overcome them. Your perception of reality is an elaborate white deception. Wake up to your reality.